Well, good morning. I just want to take a moment before I get started this morning to give a shout out to the Duffield family and to Ben for clearing our parking lots and our sidewalks this morning. Yep. Special thanks to them. I know my walk across the parking lot was a lot easier because of them, so thanks, guys. And of course, we're grateful on days like this, especially for all of you who are here worshiping with us. And we're grateful for those who are worshiping from home, whether you are in your living room or dining room or wherever you are. It's holy ground when you're choosing to worship with us. And so we're grateful for all of you this morning. And we're right smack dab in the middle of our Advent series, God with us. And today in particular, we're going to focus on what it means to have a God who is with us, particularly during our difficult times in life. And I want to start by sharing, some of the things that come to mind this time of year, and we kind of talk about it and joke about it a lot, but I had an aunt that I remember when I was a kid who would traditionally decorate her house for Christmas the day after Thanksgiving. And that, back in the early 70s, mid-late 70s, was considered early. I know for my family, it was another week or two before we broke out the decorations, and I can even remember that there were years when the tree and the trains didn't go up until Christmas Eve. And I specifically remember, because my family was part of it, even the church wasn't necessarily decorated for Christmas on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. But throughout the years, the start date of celebrating has gotten earlier and earlier. This isn't a new topic. We've joked about it. We've debated it. And I admit, full disclosure, we've even commercialized Christmas a little further by buying into it. I find myself looking for everything earlier than I normally have. But why? Why is it that Christmas seems to get earlier and earlier every year? Well, I did a little research, and I've discovered that it actually has a name. We put a name to it. It's called the Christmas creep. It's a real thing. By definition, it's the phenomenon of retailers and public spaces launching holiday-themed promotions, decorations, and music earlier each year, often before Halloween or Thanksgiving. And some of the reasons that are given for the Christmas creep are obvious, right? Retailers are looking to boost sales during the final quarter of the fiscal year. This creates a competition among them, forcing them to not be too far behind the others by creating an environment that's attractive to holiday shoppers. The supply chain is said to have something to do with it, as inventory can be moved after it's been sitting in a warehouse for an extended time. But one of the biggest trends of this early Christmas really appeared within the last 5 years, when it became more apparent that the early decorating and preparations were to help people deal with something that is known as seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. It's a real thing. We saw it during the summer of 2020 when radio stations were playing Christmas music to boost the morale of people who were held up in their homes in quarantine. People are getting a jump start on the holiday because they see it as the most wonderful time of the year, and they need more of it. Therapist Amy Morin says, there's research that decorating helps us. So when you start to see your neighbors decorating, people talking about the holidays, it kind of makes us feel like we're in something together. It reduces the feeling of collective dread or collective anxiety that you have during difficult times. Christmas brings a joy that the world seems to need. I think that's an obvious statement. But a true factual statement I want to make this morning is that the season of Christmas is temporary, but the Christ of Christmas is eternal. The season of Christmas might be temporary, but the Christ of Christmas is eternal. And that's the whole point of Christmas. God knew the world, or the people walking in darkness, needed a Savior. Eventually, the decorations would have to come down, and the music will stop playing, and the retail stores will move on to the next holiday. You know it. You're going to see Valentine's Day before Christmas. But the Christ of Christmas will remain. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. So what does that look like in a world where people struggle? What does that look like in a world where you feel like you go through periods of time when you have unanswered prayer? And the reality of Christmas is that regardless of how much you decorate, how many things you do to celebrate, or how many dozens of cookies you bake, the struggles of the world continue to exist. And sometimes Christmas is a time when most of those difficult things are even more difficult to endure. But brothers and sisters, Christmas is about God stepping down in the middle of a mess. In Isaiah chapter 7, we read that beautiful verse, "The Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel." But that powerful verse happens in the midst of turmoil. It's in this chapter that we find Judah during the rule of Ahaz, who was a wicked king who worshiped other gods. He remade the temples of Jerusalem following the patterns of the pagan altars of Damascus, and he becomes more and more corrupt as time goes by. He's feeling the pressure of possible invasion when the nation of Israel have joined forces. And in Isaiah 7:2 we read, "The hearts of Ahaz and the people were shaken as the trees in the forest are shaken by the wind." In other words, they were filled with fear for what might become of Judah. But through Isaiah, God speaks to his heart and tries to win his trust. "Be careful," Isaiah says. "Keep calm and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood." God's talking about the areas of Aram and Ephraim as being all smoke and no fire. And God even goes on to assure him that the invasion will not take place. It will not happen. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. And then he says pretty firmly, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. So God goes on to say, "Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or on the highest heights." And I believe that's his way of saying whether you're in the pit of something dark or you're seeing yourself with great victories and great establishment as a ruler, God lays it out for him. Even tells him Israel won't be successful in invading Judah. All he needs to do is ask for a sign. But Ahaz said, "I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test." Now, if you know nothing about Ahaz, it kind of sounds like he has a relationship with the Lord and doesn't want to do such a thing as to test him. But it seems that the real heart of Ahaz is more concerned that if the Lord comes through with his promise, then he'll have to believe in and truly trust in God. So in response, Isaiah says this. Then Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of David. Is it not enough to try the patience of men? Will you try the patience of my God also?" In other words, what he's saying there is that you are treating God on the same level as you do one another. And when you do that, you inevitably trust God like you trust others. We know God doesn't work that way. Isaiah is making the point here. And he goes on to say, and this is where we get the therefore statement, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. Now, to be fair, it would be difficult for Ahaz, as this prophecy comes around 700 or 800 BC. So this is long before the birth of Jesus. And yet I believe that makes his point even more significant. It's as if God is saying that it is for this very reason, because of the condition of hearts like yours, that God will send a Savior. Consider also, as far removed from the birth of Jesus that we find him in this story, think about how far removed we are from the life and ministry of Jesus. You might find yourself in a place where it's just as challenging for you to trust and believe in something that took place over 2,000 years ago. So maybe you have more in common this morning with Ahaz than you care to admit. He is rejecting what God is offering in the midst of crisis. He's choosing to deal with his turmoil based on his own understanding and his own instincts. Things are not going well for him. And considering the prophecy of Jesus being declared right in the middle of it, one might say what Ahaz really needs in this moment is a little Christmas. But he doesn't have the benefit of masking his concern by putting up a Christmas tree or hanging stockings. He's not going to take the family out for a stroll through town to check out the beautiful lights and hear the local choir singing by candlelight. In other words, Ahaz doesn't have anything to distract him from the harsh reality. But he does have a sign from God who says, I am coming, and I will not leave you to deal with the mess that you're currently in. And even though Ahaz doesn't have the benefit of seeing the prophecy come to pass, he is being given direction from God himself. And because he can't see it as such, Isaiah says one day God will make himself known by becoming one of you and being with you. Now, I think it's important for us to pause for a moment here so that we're not confused by this. God is with him in this moment through the prophet Isaiah. That's how prophets were used during this time. God spoke to people through the prophets. But because of his unbelief, the prophecy of God in the flesh is foretold to pave the way for trusting in the coming Messiah and trusting in what he says is true. And again, I think the message here is that it's for this very reason, because of the lack of trust in what God is doing in your midst, that he will come in the flesh and will walk among you. He'll minister to the needs of the people, and he'll be obedient to the will of his Father and die on the cross for the salvation of the world. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read about the birth of Jesus. And Matthew quotes Isaiah, but adds the meaning of Emmanuel. He says, all of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophets. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Matthew is driving the point home that this is not a God who is high in the heavens with no understanding of what life is like for us. This is not a God who considers himself to be above us and our needs. This is a God who is with us, come to live like us, to feel our pain, to witness our afflictions, and to bear the weight of all of our sin so that we might be redeemed or rescued from the fate of the rest of the world. So what does that mean for us in the 21st century? What does that mean for you this morning in the heart of the Christmas season? Well, I want to share with you my personal story that this time last year, I was in a difficult place. I love Christmas because of the way my family celebrated it, and because of everything about it was always done in a big way in our house and in our family. And my parents always helped us focus in the midst of it all on what was truly important and what Christmas was really all about. But last year was the first year that I was without either of my parents. Mom had passed just before Thanksgiving, and with the holidays coming so quickly after, I remember that there was just a numbness about everything from Thanksgiving through Christmas. The family got together as usual for each holiday. The decorations went up like usual. The presents were exchanged like usual. But the season was anything but usual. And every year on Christmas Eve, there's something about the silent night moment when the candles are lit and we're all singing together that takes me back. I can still see myself on Christmas Eve as a little boy holding my candle, standing alongside my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. And I feel like in that moment every year, so much of my life flashes before my eyes. And of course, last year, in addition to the pain that I was already feeling, I was recalling just a year prior, standing next to my mom, helping her get through what would have been a difficult time as she was grieving the loss of my dad. And for the first time in my life, I can say with all certainty that Mr. Christmas, because that's what they call me, was relieved when January came. I felt like for the first time ever, I could relate to the people who struggle with the holidays because of loss, because of sadness, or even just loneliness. It brought a greater meaning to my leadership in the grief share ministry here at our church. It opened my eyes to the struggles that people deal with in the midst of the joy of the season. And like any experience in my walk of faith, time brought clarity and proof to the reality that God was with me and my family through all of it. The Christmas that I've grown to love was created because of a legacy that was left behind by people who trusted in a God to be with them through the most difficult of times. Christmas came and went with all the trappings, but the God that I was taught to believe in and trust, and the Jesus who I developed a relationship with, was still present when the tree came down and the lights were unplugged. In fact, it was the way in which God saw me through life's difficult moments that I can now celebrate all the more this season. Because it's for this very reason I came to trust him to be with me. The writer of Hebrews reminds us that on this side of Isaiah's prophecy, that is, after Jesus' life and ministry and him walking among the people, that we have a great high priest who has gone on through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. So we can now hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who's been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet is without sin. So let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. So as our advocate, Jesus understands when you go through difficult times. You don't have a God who sits on a throne and just watches from a distance without understanding. Jesus has felt what you feel and knows what it means to carry burdens, to feel alone, to feel angry and sad, and to be tempted. It can be easy for us to feel the Lord's presence in your life when you're overcoming something, or you experience an answered prayer, or you go through a season of blessing after blessing. But when a dry spell comes, or you feel like you're walking through a valley, those are the moments when you need to trust that God is with you. And God doesn't want you to face those moments without the assurance that he is near. You can truly sense his presence in the midst of life's high moments. But God does some of his best work in the low moments and in the times when you might feel that you're at your weakest. Remember, Isaiah told Ahaz to ask God for a sign. And that's the message for you this morning. In those moments when you struggle, ask the God who is already with you for what you need in that moment. In my experience, the moments when you feel like God is furthest away from you, the truth is, you have moved further from him. He hasn't moved. He hasn't abandoned you, and he hasn't forgotten about you. You know, David wrote in Psalm 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. And it's believed that he wrote this or spoke these words while he was in a cave hiding with a group of men who needed to be encouraged. And so he's basically giving a testimony to this group of guys when he shares his own experiences and says, I will bless the Lord at all times. And he goes on to recount saying things like, I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. And he encourages the men to trust God and to follow him, seeking righteousness in their own lives. And he said, when you do, the Lord will be close to you in those moments. And when you are broken and your spirit feels crushed, he will be with you. That's Emmanuel. That's God with us. It's not just a season, and it's not dependent on how much you make of it. It's the presence of God in your life 24/7. The 4 Advent candles represent love, joy, peace, and hope. But when you grasp the magnitude of God's love for you, it gives you confidence to move forward in your faith and see him at work in every day. His everlasting joy makes it possible to come through grief, knowing that as much as there's pain in this life, and pain is a part of this life, so is the joy of the Lord. His peace is the anchor for your soul that allows you to let go of those things that burden you and know that his presence in your life through difficult times. And one of the lessons that I've learned recently about hope is that it's a lifeline that you can hold on to when you're in the pit of despair. Hope isn't a feeling. It's a calm assurance that God is in control and that what he promises in his word is true. And one of those promises we find in the Gospel of John. I love this. Jesus himself tells his disciples about his second coming. Ahaz had the prophet Isaiah, but the disciples had the Messiah to tell them that he would come and he would come again. And he said, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. Now, I've shared those words at many funerals that are meant to be a comfort to people in their grief as a promise of heaven. But there's an added comfort in here where Jesus is saying, not only is heaven a real place prepared for you when the time comes, but with Jesus, you are being prepared in this life for heaven. In other words, when we trust in him, when we trust in his presence in our lives through every season, he is preparing us to be with him everything we go through, all the deep valleys and the mountain peaks that we experience are part of our preparation for the kingdom. Aren't those words of comfort for you this morning? God is with you. Maybe that's something you've always believed, but never really put into practice. Sometimes I think we lose the magnitude of that truth because we're overwhelmed by life. In the back of our minds, it's easy to say, God's got this, and I'm going to give it to him. But when you're right there in the moment, the here and now, you feel like you need to act on your own and move forward however you can in order to get through this momentary struggle. Well, I'm here to tell you this morning to stop doing that. Stop. Give it to him. Trust him with it. And then trust that how you move forward is his direction and not your own. After Jesus gave his disciples the promise of heaven, he told them that they knew the way to get where Jesus was going. And Thomas, who spoke up either for himself or maybe he spoke up to say what everybody else was thinking, said, "We don't know where you're going, so how can we know how to get there?" And so Jesus reminded them by first saying, "I am the way." If you want to experience the life that I'm talking about, you need to do it with me. If you want to experience God with you, you need Jesus because he is the only way to God. And then he said that he also was the truth. Isn't life all about pursuing the truth? When you have a relationship with Jesus, he represents truth, and he provides a book of truth to keep you grounded. But I think the icing on the cake is when Jesus also said that he is life. When you feel like you have no purpose or you're struggling to get through the day-to-day, Jesus says, "Do it with me, and I will bring life to your walk." Jesus will give life to the here and now because he is Emmanuel, God with us today. And he says no one gets to the Father except through him. And so the season of Christmas is temporary, but the Christ of Christmas wants to be with you always. And so I'm saying this morning, brothers and sisters, don't leave here today without letting go of whatever burdens are dragging you down in this season. Maybe this is the opportunity to stop and focus on him, to hear from him. This morning could be a sacred moment between you and God, aside from all of the to-do lists and the schedules and the things that will clutter your time and mind in the next couple of weeks. Don't leave here today if you aren't sure if you're walking with Jesus in this season. God wants Christmas to be more than just a temporary celebration, but an eternal truth that you live out because you have a relationship with Emmanuel. So don't walk out the door and just go about the hustle and bustle of the season without taking him with you. And so this morning I want to suggest that we take this opportunity to experience God with you. If you've been walking with Jesus for many years, there's always room for a deeper commitment and a closer walk. If you've been uncertain as to where you stand in your relationship with Jesus, be certain today. And if you know for a fact that you don't have a relationship with him, begin it today. And so I want to say this morning that as we take the time to sing this last song, you could sit, you could stand, you come forward and spend time at the altar. If you're at home, as I said before we started this morning, you're on holy ground because you're worshiping together with us today. So take these moments in the quietness to allow it to be a sacred moment between you and God. And let him do a work within you so that you know Emmanuel, God with us in this season.